The night was heavy with rain. The sky was black, and thunder rolled in the distance. The old wooden house stood alone at the edge of the town, its windows shaking every time the wind screamed. Inside the house, a man named Daniel sat near the window with a cup of tea. The warmth of the tea rose in small clouds, fogging up the glass before him. It was a normal night for him, a quiet night, or so he thought. Daniel lived alone. His days were filled with silence, his nights with loneliness. He sometimes turned on the radio, but tonight, he let the storm be his music. The sound of water hitting the roof gave him comfort. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. That was when he noticed something strange. On the glass of the window, a line appeared in the fog. At first, he thought it was only a trick of his imagination, but slowly, clearly, words began to form. His heart skipped a beat as he leaned closer. In shaky letters, someone had written, "Let me in." Daniel froze. The house was locked, the door bolted, and no one was supposed to be outside. The storm was too wild for anyone to wander in the night. He pressed his face to the window, wiping away the mist with his hand. His eyes searched the darkness outside. At first he saw nothing but the endless rain. Then his breath caught. There in the shadows of the storm stood a figure, a woman, pale and still, her dark hair sticking to her face from the rain. Her eyes glowed faintly like the reflection of light, but there were no lights around. She did not knock, she did not speak. She only stared at him through the glass, and with one trembling finger, she wrote again on the foggy window, "Let me in." Daniel stumbled back from the window. His mind raced, his body told him to stay away, but his curiosity chained him to the spot. The woman looked fragile, almost broken by the storm, but there was something unnatural about her presence, something he could not explain. The way her glowing eyes never blinked, the way her hand moved slow but steady on the glass. Every part of him wanted to run, yet his feet refused to move. The storm howled louder. The candle on his table flickered, throwing shadows across the room. Daniel felt his heart beating so loud he feared she might hear it. The words on the window seemed to shine against the fog. He whispered to himself, "This cannot be real." But when he turned back, the words were still there, clear as day. He forced himself to look again outside. The woman did not move away. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold, but her eyes burned like fire. Rainwater ran down her clothes, but she did not shiver. She stood perfectly still, as if waiting, as if she knew he would not ignore her. She raised her hand once more, slowly, carefully, and pressed it against the glass. Daniel stepped closer without thinking. The cold from the glass seeped through to his skin. He could almost feel the chill from her hand on the other side. Her lips moved, but the storm swallowed her voice. He could not hear her words, yet he knew what she was saying. The same words written on the glass. "Let me in." Fear and pity fought inside him. She looked lost, helpless, but something about her felt dangerous. His father used to tell him never to open the door to strangers at night. But this was not just any stranger. This was something else, something that made the night itself feel heavier. The storm outside seemed alive, like it was waiting for his choice. Daniel took a step back, his hand on the window frame. He closed his eyes, breathing hard. The safe thing would be to walk away, to hide in his room. But his heart was restless, his curiosity burning. Why was she here? Why him? Why now? The storm roared as if demanding an answer. He opened his eyes and stared at the glass again. The woman's glowing eyes locked on his, piercing through the rain. The words on the window began to fade as the fog shifted. But before they vanished, she traced them again with her finger. "Let me in," Daniel whispered to himself. "Who are you?" But the only reply was her silent stare. His hands trembled as he reached toward the lock of the window. He hesitated, the candle flame almost dying with the gust of wind. The night held its breath, and Daniel had to decide, open the door to her, or let the storm swallow her away. Daniel's hand shook on the lock, but in the end, he did not open the window. Instead, he turned toward the front door, his heart thundering louder than the storm itself. Step by step, he walked across the creaking floorboards, each sound echoing in the silence of the house. The storm outside rattled the walls as if warning him to stop. But curiosity pulled him forward like a rope. When he reached the door, his hand rested on the cold metal handle. For one long moment, he stood frozen. Fighting with himself, finally, he unlocked it. And the old hinges groaned as he opened the door. The rain rushed in at once, cold and sharp, hitting his face and soaking the floor. Lightning flashed, and in that sudden white light, he saw her standing just a few steps away. She was exactly as he had seen through the window, pale, wet, and silent. Her long, dark hair stuck to her skin. Her clothes clung to her thin frame. Her glowing eyes reflected the lightning, and in that moment they looked almost alive. But it was not the glow that froze Daniel's breath, it was her stillness. She stood like a statue, like she had been waiting for centuries just for this door to open. Slowly she stepped inside. Her movements were graceful, too smooth, like water flowing. Daniel's stomach tightened as he realized her feet left no sound on the floor. The rain dripped from her hair and clothes, but the drops vanished before they touched the ground, he whispered, almost without meaning to. "Who are you?" The woman lifted her head and finally spoke, her voice soft but heavy. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me." The words were simple, but they carried a strange weight. It was not the voice of someone lost in a storm. It was the voice of someone who had crossed a distance no normal person could cross. Daniel's throat went dry, but he forced himself to speak again. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "The storm is too strong." Her lips curled into a faint smile, though her eyes never softened. "The storm follows me," she replied. "It always has." Daniel's heart skipped. He tried to laugh, tried to tell himself it was a joke. But when the wind screamed louder outside, rattling the glass, he knew she was not lying. She moved deeper into the room, her wet clothes brushing against the air. Leaving behind a trail of coldness, Daniel shivered even though the fireplace burned bright in the corner. Her presence felt heavier than the storm, filling the house with something unseen, something that made the shadows stretch longer on the walls. He watched her carefully, his instincts screaming at him to be cautious. Every part of her looked human, yet every movement reminded him she was not. She sat down slowly on the chair across from his. For a moment she said nothing, only looked at the window where the words had been written. Her glowing eyes reflected the candlelight, making them appear like two burning coals. Finally, she broke the silence. "I have been waiting," she whispered. Daniel swallowed. "Waiting for what?" Her answer came softly, almost drowned by the storm. "For someone who would not turn away," she said. "For someone who would open the door." Daniel's chest tightened as he tried to understand. "Why me?" he asked. "Why my house?" She tilted her head slightly, her wet hair sliding over her shoulder. "Because you saw me," she said, "and you did not close your eyes." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He thought about all the times he had ignored strange sounds in the night, all the times he had closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and pretended nothing was there. But tonight he had looked. He had read the words on the window. He had chosen to open the door. Now she was here, and the air inside the house felt like a trap. The storm outside roared louder, but he realized something unsettling. The storm was no longer only outside, it was inside with her. Daniel's breath came short as he studied her. Her pale hands rested calmly on her knees. Yet he noticed her fingers were too long, too thin, bending like branches swaying in the wind. When she blinked, it was slow, unnatural, like time itself paused for her. He wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in his throat. It was as if his own house did not belong to him anymore. It belonged to her now, and to whatever had followed her here. The woman leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "You let me in," she said, "and now I must warn you." Her voice cut through the storm, sharp and cold. Daniel felt his chest tighten as though the air itself had turned heavy. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. Her answer was quiet but clear. "They will come for me," she said, "and now they will come for you too." Lightning cracked outside. Shaking the whole house, the sound of thunder rolled across the night. Deep and endless, Daniel turned his head toward the window, but he saw nothing beyond the sheets of rain. When he looked back at her, she was smiling faintly, as if she already knew the shadows outside were moving closer. His stomach dropped. He realized that by opening the door, he had not only let her inside, he had invited something else into his life, something far darker. Daniel stood frozen, the storm hammering against the house. The woman's words echoed in his mind. "They will come for me, and now they will come for you too." He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his body tense. He had expected fear, maybe pity, but not a warning like this. Still, he could not look away from her glowing eyes. They seemed to hold more than words, something ancient, something untold. The woman sat calmly, her wet clothes leaving no puddle on the floor. The The storm outside bent itself around her presence. As if it belonged to her, Daniel wanted to ask more. But his voice trembled too much, so instead he whispered, "What are you?" She tilted her head slowly, her long hair sliding across her shoulders like water. "I am what your kind calls a traveler," she said. "A visitor from a place you cannot see?" Daniel shivered. Her tone was soft, but every word carried a weight that pressed against his chest. "A visitor," he repeated, as if saying it aloud would make it easier to believe. She nodded once, never breaking eye contact. "I was searching for a door," she explained. "A door into a safe place." Her gaze deepened, burning into him. "And you opened it?" Daniel felt a wave of unease. He had opened his door to a stranger, but it was more than that. It was as if he had accepted something beyond his understanding. "Why me?" he asked, his voice sharp with fear. "Why did you come to me?" Her lips curled into the faintest smile, a smile that carried no warmth. "Because you saw me," she said. "You did not close your eyes and you did not walk away." Daniel turned toward the window. The rain beat against it like endless fingers tapping. He thought about all the times he had ignored the world outside, the nights when strange noises came from the woods and he pulled his curtains shut. But tonight was different. Tonight he had looked. Tonight he had chosen to open the door, and now the woman sat in his home, her glowing eyes burning through the dark. The air grew heavier. Daniel noticed his candle flame shrinking. As if struggling to breathe, he whispered, "If I hadn't opened the door, what would have happened?" The woman leaned forward slowly, her cold presence filling the space between them. "I would still be out there," she said, "and they would have found me alone." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "But now you are with me and they will not ignore you." Daniel's stomach twisted. He could hear the storm pounding harder, louder, as if something enormous moved within it. "They," he repeated. "Who are they?" The woman looked toward the window, her expression unchanged. Her lips parted slightly and she whispered, "Hunters." The word felt like poison, slipping into the room and clinging to the air. Daniel's hands trembled. "Hunters? What kind of hunters could follow a woman like her?" He wanted to ask again, but the answer was already in her eyes. Not human hunters, not ordinary ones. The kind of hunters that could walk through storms and follow a traveler across worlds. The kind of hunters that were already here, circling his house like wolves in the dark. The woman stood, her figure tall and sharp against the candlelight. Her voice dropped lower, colder. "Now you must decide." Daniel frowned. "Decide what?" She stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the floor. "Keep me here," she said, "and they will fight to enter. You will stand with me, and together we will face them." Her eyes gleamed brighter. "Or send me away and they will leave you in peace." "But I will be taken." Daniel's chest tightened. The choice wrapped around him like chains. He had never been asked something so heavy. If he chose himself, he would survive but abandon her to whatever horror hunted her. If he chose her, he would be dragged into a nightmare he could not escape. His mind screamed for safety, but his heart whispered another truth. He looked at her carefully, her pale face, her wet hair, her eyes glowing like fire in the storm. She was not human, not like him. But she had knocked at his door for a reason, and though fear burned inside him, so did something else, curiosity, maybe even a spark of courage. "You ask me to risk everything," Daniel said, his voice shaking. Her faint smile returned. "I ask you to be human." The storm slammed against the house like a warning. Daniel turned toward the door, the wood rattling as if something clawed at it from outside. His heart raced, his breath shallow. The candle flickered, shadows twisting like creatures across the walls. The woman waited, still and silent, her glowing eyes locked on him. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Waiting for his answer, Daniel stepped forward slowly. His voice was low but steady. "You asked me to let you in, and I did." He swallowed hard, his chest tight. "Now I will not send you away." Her eyes widened, a faint light sparking within them. The storm outside roared louder, as if the night itself heard his choice. The woman whispered, almost like a prayer, "Then you have invited more than me." At that moment, the house shuddered, the walls shook, the windows rattled violently. Something moved in the storm, shadows too large, too fast. Circling the house, Daniel's blood ran cold. But he clenched his fists. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back. The invitation was complete, and the night had only just begun. The storm pressed harder against the house, Thunder cracked above like a giant's roar, shaking the roof with every strike. Daniel stood frozen near the door, his decision still burning in his chest. The woman, pale and silent, watched him with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. He had chosen her, chosen to keep her inside, chosen to face whatever followed her, and now, the house itself seemed to breathe heavier with that choice. Daniel forced his voice to break the silence. "What are they?" he asked, his words weak but urgent. The woman turned her head slowly toward the window, where rain streaked down in rivers. Her lips parted, and her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the storm. "They are the ones who hunt me," she said. "Creatures that move through storms, through shadows, through fear." Daniel's stomach knotted as she spoke. He wanted to believe she was only speaking in riddles, but deep inside he knew she wasn't. He stepped closer to her, his fist clenched though he didn't know why. "Why would they hunt you?" he demanded. "What did you do?" For the first time, she looked away from him, her gaze falling to the floor. Her silence stretched longer than the thunder. "Finally," she said, "because I left them." Her words were simple but heavy. Daniel frowned. "Left them," he repeated. She nodded slowly, her wet hair clinging to her pale cheeks. "I was part of them once," she said. "I was one of them, walking in the storm, chasing travelers who crossed into your world." Her eyes flickered with pain as she spoke. "But I grew tired of the hunt, tired of the endless taking, tired of watching humans fall." Daniel's heart raced as he listened. He could not imagine this fragile-looking woman as a hunter, but her voice carried the weight of truth. "And it chilled him more than the storm, you mean?" Daniel whispered. "You hunted people?" Her glowing eyes lifted. Locking on his, "I hunted souls," she said, her tone flat, without pride, without shame. The candle between them sputtered, its flame shrinking. Daniel's chest tightened, his breath shallow. "You expect me to trust you?" "After that?" he asked, his voice cracking. Her face did not change, but her voice softened. "I expect you to see that I am here now, not there." The storm growled outside, and Daniel could almost swear he heard whispers carried in the wind. Voices that did not belong to the rain. Voices that circled the house. The woman lifted her hand slowly. Pointing to the wall, Daniel turned, and his blood ran cold across the wooden boards. Faint black lines spread like cracks, they pulsed like veins, glowing faintly with the same eerie light as her eyes. "They are close," she said. "They can smell me." "They can smell you," Daniel staggered back, his head shaking. "This can't be real," he muttered, his voice breaking. The woman stepped closer, her presence cold but steady. "It is real," she whispered, "and you have already chosen." Her words dug into him like hooks. He wanted to deny it, to scream at her to leave, but part of him knew it was too late. The invitation had been made, and the hunters would not leave until the game was done. "Tell me the truth," Daniel said suddenly, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "Why did you come here? Why me? Why now?" The woman blinked slowly, unnaturally, like a predator measuring its prey. But when she spoke, her voice carried no malice, only sorrow. "Because you believe," she said. "You still believe in others, even when you shouldn't." Her glowing eyes softened just slightly. "And belief is a door they cannot close." Daniel's knees felt weak. The storm screamed outside, and the whispers grew louder, pressing against the walls like invisible claws. He could almost see shapes moving in the rain, tall figures, sliding shadows. The woman's eyes stayed fixed on him, as if his reaction mattered more than the storm itself. "You think I'm weak," she said quietly, "but you don't understand what humans hold." Daniel swallowed, his heart hammering. "What do we hold?" Her lips curled into the faintest, saddest smile. "Hope," she said, "and hope is something they cannot kill." The words struck him harder than thunder. For a moment, he felt the weight of her story, the weight of her betrayal. She had turned against her own kind, and now she was hunted for it, and somehow, she had chosen him, a lonely man in a quiet house on a stormy night. Daniel tried to steady his breathing. He looked into her glowing eyes and saw not just danger, but desperation. She was not only hunted, she was running from who she had been. The house shook violently as something slammed against the walls. The candle went out, plunging the room into darkness. Daniel's chest tightened, his hands fumbling for balance in the dark. The woman's glowing eyes became the only light in the room. "They are here," she whispered, her voice cold as stone. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Outside, the storm roared, and in the darkness beyond the walls, the hunters had finally arrived. The house trembled under the storm's fury. Daniel pressed his back against the wall, his breath short and shallow. The candle was gone, leaving the room in shadows. Only the woman's glowing eyes lit the darkness. Two burning points that never blinked. She stood perfectly still, listening. As if her ears could hear beyond the walls, Daniel could hear it too. The faint scrape of something moving outside. Something not human. The wind howled, but beneath it, there were footsteps, heavy, dragging, circling the house with slow patience. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, each beat louder than the thunder. He whispered, his voice almost breaking. "They're here, aren't they?" The woman nodded once, her pale face unreadable. "They have found me," she said softly. "And now they will test you." Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to shout at her, to demand she leave. But the words died in his mouth. The storm outside bent around the house. Each gust of wind like claws against the wood. Shadows flickered across the window. Tall and twisted, Daniel forced himself to step closer, peering into the rain-soaked glass for one terrible moment. Lightning struck and he saw them, figures, tall, thin, their bodies bent like broken branches, their faces hidden, their eyes glowing faintly like dying embers. They moved without sound, sliding across the ground as if the storm carried them. Daniel staggered back, his stomach twisting in terror. He had never seen anything like them, and his mind screamed to deny they existed. But they were there, circling his house, watching, waiting. The woman's voice cut through his panic, calm but sharp. "They are not here for the house," she said. "They are here for the choice you made." Daniel turned to her, his hands shaking. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Her glowing eyes fixed on him, her tone heavy. "You opened the door to me," she said. "So now they will try to open the door to you." The words sank into him like ice. Daniel felt the weight of them pressing against his chest. His invitation was not just a decision, it was a bond, a link between himself and her, and now, the hunters outside would use it, twisting it into their own test. The house rattled again as something scraped across the walls. Slow and deliberate, the sound was not claws, not hands, but something else, something sharper. Daniel clutched the edge of the table for balance. "What do they want from me?" he asked, his voice cracking. The woman stepped closer, her presence cold but steady. "They want to break you," she said. "They want to see if you will turn against me." Daniel shook his head, his heart racing. "I don't even know you," he whispered. "Why would I risk everything for you?" Her eyes softened. "Just slightly, because you already did," she said. The words cut deeper than the storm. Daniel wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He had opened the door, he had let her in, and now there was no turning back. The shadows outside grew thicker. Pressing against the windows, the glass shook, tiny cracks forming across the surface. Daniel's breath caught as he saw one of the tall figures stop just outside, its face pressed against the glass, its faint glowing eyes staring straight into the room. The woman did not move, did not flinch, but Daniel felt every nerve in his body scream in fear. The figure's long hand pressed against the glass, its fingers stretched impossibly far. Bending like twisted branches for a moment, Daniel thought the glass would shatter, but the figure pulled away, disappearing back into the storm. The whispers outside grew louder, swirling with the wind, voices that were not human, voices that slid into Daniel's ears like cold knives. He pressed his hands to his head. The whispers grew clearer. Speaking his name, "Daniel," they hissed. "Open the door." He staggered back, his eyes wide in horror. "They're talking to me," he whispered. His voice breaking, the woman stepped closer, her glowing eyes burning brighter. "Do not listen," she said firmly. "They speak only lies." Daniel shook, his body trembling. The voices grew louder, overlapping, endless. "Let us in, Daniel. Let us in," they hissed together. His knees buckled, his chest heavy. He wanted to scream, to shut them out, but the storm carried their words into his bones. The woman's cold hand touched his shoulder, steadying him. "They cannot enter unless you allow it," she said. "They need your choice, just as I did." Daniel's eyes filled with fear. "They want me to choose them," he whispered. The woman nodded, her voice soft but sharp. "Yes, they want your hope, they want your belief. They want to break what makes you human." The storm thundered, the walls shaking harder. Daniel clenched his fists, fighting to stay grounded. He understood now, this was no ordinary night. This was a battle for his own soul. The shadows outside circled faster. The windows shook, the roof groaned. The voices rose in a chorus, calling his name again and again. Daniel closed his eyes, his chest burning. He could feel the hunters pressing against his thoughts, against his fears, but deep inside a spark burned brighter. The same spark the woman had spoken of, hope. When he opened his eyes again, he met her glowing stare. His voice was weak, but it carried a threat of defiance. "They want me to open the door," he said. "But I won't." Her faint smile returned, sad yet proud. "Then you are stronger than most," she whispered. The storm roared in rage outside, shaking the house to its core. The hunters had been denied. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The house shook like it was alive, every window rattled, the roof groaned, and the wooden walls creaked under the weight of the storm. Daniel pressed his back against the table, his breath uneven, his hands trembling. The hunters outside moved in circles, their shadows stretching across the glass. Each time lightning struck, their twisted bodies flashed into view. Long arms, bent shapes, and faces that were not faces. The whispers pressed harder into his mind, pulling at his thoughts like hooks in water. The woman stood in the center of the room, still and calm, her glowing eyes cut through the dark, a faint fire in the storm of shadows. "They will not stop," she said quietly. "They will test you until you break." Her voice carried no fear, but Daniel could see something in her expression. Not panic, but a kind of sorrow, as if she had watched this happen before. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "What do they want from me?" he asked, his voice cracking, her head tilted slightly, her wet hair sliding over her face. "They want you to reject me," she said. "If you send me away, they will leave you and you will live." Daniel's chest tightened. "And if I don't," he whispered, her glowing eyes burned brighter. "Then you fight beside me." She paused, her voice low and heavy. "And if you fail, you die with me." The words hung in the room like chains. Daniel's throat tightened, his body frozen with fear. He looked toward the window again, watching the hunters slide past the glass, their limbs dragging like shadows on water. They wanted him to open the door, to choose them. The whispers grew louder, pulling at his thoughts. "Send her away, Daniel. Send her away and live." Daniel shut his eyes, pressing his palms against his ears. The voices still slipped in, wrapping around him like the storm itself. His heart pounded as memories rushed through his mind. The nights he had spent alone, staring at the empty walls. The moments he had wished for someone, anyone, to knock at his door, and now someone had. But she was not just anyone. She was something else. Something hunted, something dangerous. The woman stepped closer, her cold presence filling the space between them. "You do not owe me," she said softly. "You do not even know me." Her words were calm, almost freeing, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Fear, not of death but of being abandoned. Daniel's breath shook as he whispered, "Then why come to me?" Her lips trembled slightly, though her voice remained steady. "Because hope must live somewhere," she said, "and I saw it burning in you." The house groaned as something slammed against the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The floorboards shuddered. The hunters were growing restless, circling faster, their whispers sharpening into snarls. Daniel staggered back, gripping the edge of the chair for balance. He felt trapped, cornered, crushed between two impossible choices: save himself by abandoning her, or risk everything to stand with her. He forced his shaking voice to rise above the storm. "If I send you away," he asked, "what happens to you?" Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly. "They will take me back," she said, "and I will not return." Her tone was steady, but Daniel could feel the weight in it. Not anger, not bitterness, but quiet acceptance. She had lived with this possibility, perhaps for longer than he could imagine. The voices outside grew sharper, louder. "Daniel," they hissed, "choose life. Send her away." His knees buckled, his chest heavy. He wanted to collapse, to give in, but his heart kept him upright. He looked at the woman again, at her glowing eyes and fragile frame. She was not human. She had hunted before. She had done terrible things, but she had turned away from that. And now she was hunted for it. The storm screamed, shaking the windows so hard they nearly shattered. Daniel's choice pressed against him, heavier than the storm, heavier than the hunters. He closed his eyes, his voice breaking. "I don't want to die," he whispered. Silence filled the room, broken only by the thunder. When he opened his eyes, she stood waiting, her face unreadable. "But I don't want to abandon you either," he finished, his voice stronger this time. Her glowing eyes brightened. Not with fire, but with something softer. "You would fight for me?" she asked, her voice trembling for the first time. Daniel swallowed, his fear still burning. But his answer clear. "Yes," he said. "I will fight." The storm roared as if the night itself had heard his choice. The whispers outside turned into howls. Furious and wild, the hunters had been denied. And now they would strike. The woman's faint smile returned. Sad but proud. "Then hold fast," she whispered. "For the night is long and they will not stop until dawn." Her presence grew colder. But it felt different now, not the chill of danger, but the chill of strength. Daniel clenched his fists, his fear burning into something sharper. He had made his choice and there was no turning back. The storm outside screamed louder, the hunters pressing harder against the walls. And inside the house, two figures stood together, ready to face the night. The storm roared like a living beast outside. The house shuddered under the weight of shadows pressing against its walls. Daniel stood with his fists clenched, his breath sharp and fast. The woman's glowing eyes burned brighter than ever. Casting faint light across the dark room, he had made his choice. And now the night demanded he stand by it, he whispered to himself almost as a vow. "I will not send her away." The whispers outside turned into screams. The hunters were furious, their voices twisting into a chorus of rage. "Daniel," they hissed, "you chose death, you chose her. And now you will fall." Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing back the terror clawing at his chest. For so long he had lived in silence, waiting for nothing, believing in nothing, but tonight he had chosen to believe. And that belief was stronger than his fear. The walls shook violently as the hunters struck. Shadows slid through cracks in the wood, stretching like long fingers into the room. Daniel staggered back, his heart pounding. The woman raised her hand and the air froze around her. A pale light spread from her fingertips, holding the shadows at bay, but Daniel could see her strain, her body trembling under the weight of their attack. "They are stronger with the storm," she said, her voice sharp. "They will break through unless you resist with me." Daniel's breath caught. "Resist how?" he demanded, her glowing eyes locked onto his. "Do not fear them," she said. "Do not listen to them. Stand firm in your hope." Daniel's chest tightened. He was only a man. What could hope do against monsters? But the hunters pressed harder, their shapes flickering against the walls. The whispers dug deep into his thoughts. "You are weak, Daniel," they hissed. "You are nothing, let her go. Save yourself." His knees buckled as the weight of their voices crushed him. The room grew darker, the air heavier. The woman's pale hand reached out. Steadying him, her voice cut through the storm. "Stand with me, Daniel, or we are lost." Daniel forced himself to rise, his legs shaking. He thought of every lonely night he had endured, every silent dinner, every empty chair. He thought of the words written on the fogged window, "Let me in," and he realized something. The hunters wanted him to reject her because humans were capable of one thing they feared most. Humans could choose to trust, to hope even in the face of death. His lips trembled, but his voice rose above the storm. "You will not break me," he shouted. "You will not take her." The shadows recoiled, shrieking in fury. The woman's eyes glowed brighter. Feeding off his words, light spread across the room like fire. Pushing back the hunters, Daniel stood taller now, his fear burning into defiance. The hunters struck again, their claws tearing at the walls, their voices roaring. But Daniel roared back, his voice raw. "You will not have this house. You will not have me," the storm screamed. Thunder crashing, lightning flashing white across the sky. Through the window, Daniel saw them clearly. Twisted bodies writhing, faces twisted in hate, eyes burning with hunger. But he no longer looked away, no longer trembled. He faced them with bare hands, with nothing but his voice, his will, his choice. And in that moment, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he was alive, truly alive. The woman stepped beside him, her presence steady. "You see now," she whispered, "why humans are different." Her voice carried both pride and sorrow. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. "They want fear," he said. "But I won't give it." The hunters howled, furious, their shapes clawing at the edges of the light. But the light did not fade, it grew. Spreading with Daniel's resolve, the storm reached its peak, the walls rattling like bones. Then, one by one, the shadows outside began to break apart. Their forms twisted, cracked, and dissolved into the storm itself. Their whispers faded into screams, then into silence. The rain slowed. The thunder softened. The house stopped shaking. And for the first time that night, the air grew still. Daniel collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving. The woman knelt beside him, her glowing eyes dimmer now. "You chose," she said softly, "and your choice saved us." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice rough. "I was afraid," he admitted, "but I could not abandon you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, sad yet warm. "And that," she whispered, "is why they fear you." The storm outside finally broke. The clouds parting, the moonlight poured through the window. Silver and calm, the world was quiet again, as if the night itself had been reborn. Daniel stared at the pale woman beside him. She was not human, she was dangerous, she carried shadows wherever she went. But she had found him, and he had chosen to stand with her. Slowly, Daniel rose to his feet, his body heavy but his spirit unbroken. He moved to the door and opened it wide. The night air rushed in, clean and cold. No longer filled with whispers, the woman stood beside him, her eyes faintly glowing in the moonlight. "Where will you go now?" Daniel asked quietly. She looked at him, her voice soft. "Wherever you choose to walk." Daniel breathed deeply, the storm's scent still lingering. He looked out into the endless night, then back at her. A small fire burned inside his chest, a spark he thought he had lost long ago. He smiled faintly, tired but certain. "Then let's go," he said, stepping forward, and together, human and traveler, they walked out into the unknown night,